There are people who are not actually smarter than you. They didn't have a better starting point than you, and they don't even work that much harder than you. But then one day, you look at their lives and realize they've gone very far. While you are still standing close to where you first began, the scariest thing is not immediate failure. The scariest thing is the feeling that life is moving very slowly, but you're not really moving forward. You still wake up every morning, still go to work, still try, still tell yourself that things will eventually get better. But deep down, there's a part of you that knows you're living below your true potential. And that quietly eats away at who you are every single day. I've met people who spent years saying they wanted to change their lives. They wanted to make more money, wanted to be more confident, wanted to be healthier, wanted to become a better version of themselves. But then years passed, and everything stayed almost the same. Not because they were bad people, not because they were lazy, and not because they lacked potential, but because they confused wanting a better life with actually deciding to create one. That is the gap most people never realize. They love the idea of change, but they never change the structure of their lives. And life always charges based on what you repeat every day, not what you feel, not what you promise, not what you fantasize about when you feel the most motivated, but what you do when no one is watching. There's a very important principle at the end of this video, a principle that can explain why one person gradually builds the life they want while another quietly stays stuck for years, even though they once had the exact same dreams. And if today you feel like you've slowed down, lost direction, or are tired of still not becoming the person you want to become, then maybe this video didn't appear by accident. I think there's something most people have never truly understood about life. That is, wanting to change your life and truly committing to changing it are two completely different states. And the distance between those two states is where many lives get trapped. You know what's strange? People can live for decades in the state of wanting to be better, wanting to make more money, wanting more freedom, wanting more confidence, wanting to be healthier, wanting to become the version of themselves they always imagined in their minds. But then years go by, and nothing changes very much. Because desire does not create movement on its own. It only creates the feeling that someday things will be different. I've met people who read a lot of books, listened to a lot of motivational speeches, take notes on many good ideas. They can talk to you about discipline, about success, about positive thinking, about responsibility, but their lives are still standing still. And then I realized there's a kind of danger that very few people notice. It's the feeling of being inspired, because inspiration can make you think you're moving forward even when you haven't actually changed anything. You hear a powerful speech and feel like you're about to begin a new life. You watch a powerful video and think that starting tomorrow you'll be different. But then the next morning everything goes back to the way it was. The same habits, the same procrastination, the same way of using time, the same promises that were never kept. And the most painful thing is, most people don't fail because they lack potential. They fail because they constantly live in a state of interest without ever stepping into the state of commitment. There's a huge difference between those two things. When a person is only interested in changing their life, they act when they feel motivated. When they're in a good mood, they're very strong. When they feel inspired, they're very determined. When things are going well, they believe they can do anything. But the moment life becomes difficult, they start disappearing from their own journey. One day off turns into a week. 1 week turns into a few months. And then they return to the starting point again. Not because they're weak, but because interest was never strong enough to carry a person through difficult days. Commitment can do that. Commitment is when a person no longer negotiates with themselves. They don't wake up and ask, "Do I feel inspired today?" They ask, "What needs to get done today?" That's when life starts changing direction. You see, a truly committed person keeps going even when no one is cheering them on. They still read a few pages even when they haven't seen results yet. They still wake up early even when life hasn't changed yet. They still keep small promises to themselves even when nobody knows about it. Because they understand one thing, life doesn't change in the moment you feel motivated. It changes on the days you keep going, even after the emotion is gone. That is where destinies begin separating into two different paths. There are people who always wait for the right feeling before they act. And there are people who act first and let the emotions follow later. And over time, the distance between those two kinds of people becomes enormous. One person believes in themselves more and more because they continuously keep their word to themselves. The other gradually loses self-respect, not because they're not good enough, but because they've heard too many promises from themselves that never became reality. I want you to think very carefully about this. Maybe what's holding you back is not a lack of opportunity, and not a lack of ability either. Maybe the problem is, you still love the idea of a better life, but haven't truly decided to pay the price to create it. And life always clearly distinguishes between those two types of people. One person stands outside the field talking about the harvest. The other quietly plants seeds every day, even though nothing has grown yet. At first glance, the two people don't seem very different. But a few seasons later, one person has something to harvest. The other only has reasons to explain why they're still standing still. And do you know what the saddest thing is? Most people do not lose their lives in one big decision. They lose it in very small moments, moments that almost nobody notices. A promise they made to themselves and then didn't keep. An important task they postponed for one more day. A morning when they knew they should start but told themselves, I can do it tomorrow. At first glance, those things don't seem serious. But life does not change because of what you do occasionally. It changes because of what you repeat. And every time you keep avoiding the thing you know you need to do, something inside you starts becoming weaker. That is self-respect. I think many people are living with a kind of exhaustion they can't even name. They think they lack motivation, lack opportunity, lack time. But sometimes, what they truly lack is the belief that they will keep their word to themselves. Think about it. If someone constantly promised you things and constantly broke those promises, you would gradually lose trust in them, right? So why do we think we can keep breaking promises to ourselves and still maintain confidence? You can't. Real confidence does not come from reading inspirational quotes. It comes from evidence that when you say you're going to do something, you actually do it, no matter how small it is. There are people who look very strong on the outside, but inside they are slowly collapsing because they've heard too many promises from themselves without ever seeing action follow behind them. I'm going to change. I'll get serious next month. I'll start over. I'm not going to live like this anymore. But then everything returns to the way it was. And that creates a very quiet kind of pain. It doesn't knock you down immediately. It just slowly makes you lose the feeling that you could become something greater. I've seen men sitting silently in their cars after work. No music playing, not saying anything. Just staring out the window, feeling like life is moving too fast. They're not poor enough to feel hopeless, not complete failures. No one would think they're suffering, but inside they know they're standing still. That's the kind of pain only the person living through it can understand. The feeling of watching time pass while the better version of yourself still hasn't appeared. Do you know the most dangerous thing about procrastination? It's not what you lose today. It's that you slowly become the kind of person who always procrastinates. That's what's dangerous, because eventually, a person's destiny is usually built from the identity they repeat every day. A person who constantly procrastinates will start seeing themselves as unreliable. A person who constantly quits halfway through will start believing they are the kind of person who can never follow through. And then over time, they no longer need anyone else to defeat them. They shrink themselves. That's why I've always believed that the most painful thing is not when other people doubt you. The most painful thing is when you start doubting yourself. When you no longer believe your own words. When you're no longer sure you'll truly change. And this doesn't happen in one day. It happens very slowly, like a neglected garden. No one notices the decay immediately. But every day without care, the weeds grow a little more. Every day of procrastination, your belief in yourself fades a little more. Every time you choose what's easy instead of what's necessary, your life drifts a little further off course. And then one day, a person looks back and asks themselves, why am I still here after all these years? But the truth is, they didn't stand still for one day. They stood still through thousands of small decisions that once seemed unimportant. And this is the moment everything begins to change. Not when you feel motivated, not when life becomes easy, but when you begin keeping the small promises you make to yourself, very small ones. Reading a few pages when you don't feel like reading, waking up a little earlier when your body wants to keep sleeping, doing what needs to be done even when no one is watching. Because every action like that doesn't just build results, it rebuilds the person inside you. It tells your mind, maybe I'm not where I want to be yet, but this time I'm not going to abandon myself anymore. There comes a point in life when a person has to make a very difficult choice. Either continue explaining their life or begin taking responsibility for it. I know this is not easy to hear, because sometimes life truly is unfair. Some people are born with more opportunities. Some people grow up in better environments. Some people are taught confidence from a young age, while others struggle just to survive. And yes, there are wounds you did not create. There are failures that are not completely your fault. But then I realized something very important. You may not be responsible for everything that happened to you, but you are responsible for what happens next. That is where life begins separating into two paths. There are people who spend their whole lives explaining why they're stuck. They have reasons for everything. The economy, their family, their age, their circumstances, the people who hurt them. And do you know what the most dangerous part is? Many of those reasons are real. That's what keeps people trapped for so long. Because when an explanation sounds reasonable, it becomes very easy to use it to stay where you are. But the truth is, explanations do not create change. They only help us feel more comfortable with our current situation. And some people have lived too long inside the comfort zone of explanations. They became experts at telling stories about why their lives are difficult, but no longer the person creating a new direction for that life. Meanwhile, the people who truly move forward start asking different questions. Not, why did this happen to me? But, what can I do now? Not, whose fault is it? But, what do I need to change? You see, just changing the question can already begin changing a person's destiny, because questions determine the direction the mind moves toward. One question pulls you toward helplessness. Another question pulls you toward action. I once knew a man who worked a job he hated for nearly 10 years. Every day he complained. Every day he said life never gave him opportunities. But then one evening, after work, he sat in his car for a long time without starting the engine. The parking lot was almost empty. The street lights were dim yellow. Everything was silent. And for the first time, he stopped blaming others. He just sat there and told himself, if I continue living like this for another 5 years, then that is my choice. That moment was painful. But sometimes, the truth has to hurt a little to wake a person up. Because until a person truly takes responsibility for the direction of their life, they will always wait for something outside themselves to change first. Waiting for the right time, waiting for more motivation, waiting for someone to help them, waiting for life to become easier. But life usually doesn't work that way. The harvest season does not wait for the farmer to feel ready before it begins. If he doesn't plant seeds at the right time, the field does not care what excuses he has. And life is the same way. It always responds to action, not intention. That's why responsibility is not a burden. It is power. Because the moment you say, all right, from now on, this life is my responsibility, you immediately take back the power to change it. No more sitting around waiting. No more living like a spectator. You begin becoming the person holding the steering wheel. I think many people still don't understand that. Blaming may make you feel lighter for a moment, but it also takes away your power to act. If every problem is outside of you, then every solution will also be outside of you. And that is the most dangerous position a person can live in, the position of waiting. Meanwhile, the people who move forward are not always stronger than everyone else. They simply decided earlier that, no matter the circumstances, I am still responsible for my life. That changes everything, because from that moment on, every difficulty is no longer proof that they should quit. It becomes a lesson. Every failure is no longer the end. It becomes data. Every mistake is no longer something to be ashamed of. It becomes something that helps them grow. And then over time, people like that begin going very far. Not because life is easier for them, but because they stop giving their circumstances control over their lives. They understand that you cannot always choose what happens to you, but you are always choosing who you will become after those things happen. There is something people often realize too late. That is, time does not destroy your life overnight. It does it very slowly, silently, patiently, almost impossible to notice. That's why so many people don't realize they are drifting away from their own lives. Because everything happens so gradually. No one wakes up after one night and instantly becomes the version of themselves they fear. It happens through years of, I'll do it tomorrow. I still have time. There's no need to rush. I'll wait until things are more stable. And then one day, they look back. Everything is still almost the same. I think one of the most dangerous illusions people believe in is thinking they still have plenty of time. No one says it out loud, but they live as if life will always give them one more chance, one more year to begin, one more month to get serious, one more day to change. But life does not stand still while you procrastinate. It keeps moving forward, like a ship drifting just one small degree off course in the middle of the ocean. In the first few minutes, the difference is almost invisible. But after many years, it can take the ship to a completely different destination. That is how destiny is formed, not through rare major decisions, but through small directions repeated every day. I've seen many people wait for the right time to begin their lives. They want to have more money before learning something new, have more time before taking care of their health, have more confidence before pursuing what they want. But do you know what's strange? Readiness rarely comes before action. It usually appears after you begin. A person does not naturally become confident before stepping onto a stage. They step onto the stage many times and then become confident. A person does not naturally become disciplined before taking action. They act even when they are not perfect yet, and that very action creates discipline. That is where many people get stuck. They want to feel ready before they begin. While the people who move forward understand that, human beings grow through action, not through waiting. And the sad thing is, procrastination usually does not feel dangerous immediately. That's exactly why it is so dangerous. One day of procrastination looks harmless. 1 week of procrastination does not seem serious yet. 1 month of procrastination can still be forgiven. But then years pass, and a life begins to be built from countless tomorrows. I have always believed that failure is not as frightening as procrastination. Because failure at least teaches you something. It gives you experience, gives you lessons, gives you data to grow. But procrastination does not. It only keeps you in the same place, with the same fears, with the same skills, with the same life. It is like a garden that is never cared for. Nothing truly dies immediately, but nothing grows either. And over time, that is how a person's potential disappears. Not through some great tragedy, but through prolonged neglect. There are people who work very hard, but they are using time only as a way to survive, not to build. They wake up, go to work, get tired, use entertainment to escape pressure, then sleep, day after day. And then they wonder why their lives never change. But life does not respond to desire. It responds to what you invest your time into. You become what your days are building, not what you occasionally think about during moments of motivation. If every day you only live to get through today, then it is very difficult to build a different future. The people who move forward understand this very early. They do not see time as something to kill. They see it as soil for planting seeds. 1 hour reading books, 1 hour learning a new skill, 1 hour seriously thinking about their lives. At first glance, those things seem very small. But do you know the strange thing about life? Small things repeated long enough eventually create enormous differences, like water flowing over rock. Not powerful in a single day, but persistent enough to reshape the entire rock over time. And that is what many people do not understand about success. It rarely comes from one explosive moment. It usually comes from very ordinary days, when a person keeps doing what needs to be done even though nothing special is happening at all. I want to know that, in the middle of this chaotic world, there are still people who have not given up on becoming a better version of themselves. And then there is another thing many people do not want to face. That is, life usually does not reward your needs. It rewards the value you can create. I know this sounds cold, because there are people who truly need a better life. They need more money, need more opportunities, need a way out of their current pressure. But need alone is not enough. The world does not change simply because you want more. It changes when you become someone capable of creating more value. That is why two people can work equally hard, but end up with completely different lives. One person constantly develops themselves. The other simply keeps repeating the same old version of themselves. And over time, the gap begins to appear. Do you know what truly makes a person move forward? It is not that they work harder than everyone else. It is that they never stop becoming more useful. They learn how to communicate better, learn how to think more clearly, learn how to solve problems, learn how to stay calm under pressure. They do not just work, they upgrade the very person doing the work. This is the point many people miss. They think trying harder is enough. But effort without growth only creates exhaustion. There are people who work for many years, but their skills barely change. Their way of thinking does not change. Their way of reacting to problems does not change. Their ability to handle pressure does not change either. And then they ask themselves, why am I trying so hard while my life stays the same? Because doing more does not always mean becoming better. There is a huge difference between working hard and becoming better. A person can dig the same hole for 10 years and call that hard work. But if they never learned how to use better tools, then they are only wearing themselves out faster. The people who move forward understand this. They see themselves as a garden that must be constantly cared for. Every book is a seed. Every new skill is richer soil. Every difficult experience is a season that strengthens the roots. They do not grow because life is easier for them. They grow because they continuously invest in themselves. I have met very talented people, but their lives never went very far. And the reason usually was not their ability. It was that they stopped learning too early. They started thinking, I already know enough. That is a dangerous moment. Because life is always moving. If you are not growing, you are falling behind, even when you are standing still. I think one of the strongest signs of someone who will go far is that they always keep the mindset of a student. They observe, they listen, they adjust. They do not let ego stop them from growing. There are people out there making more money than you, not because they are luckier than you, but because they spent years becoming more valuable than the older version of themselves. That does not happen overnight. It is built little by little, like a farmer taking care of a garden every day. No one sees the change immediately, but beneath the ground, the roots are growing. That is the part the world usually does not see. People only see success once it begins to bloom. They do not see the quiet years of growth underneath. The evenings, when others rested while you learned one more thing. The days you failed but kept improving anyway. The moments you corrected your thinking instead of only complaining. That is where the future truly begins to be built. And this is the most important thing. When you become more valuable, you begin seeing opportunities you once overlooked. Not because the opportunities just appeared, but because finally, you became mature enough to recognize and handle them. That is why preparation always comes before opportunity. Opportunity usually does not change the life of a person who is unprepared. It only magnifies their current version. If inside you there is still a lack of discipline, a lack of ability, a lack of depth, then even when opportunity appears, you will struggle to keep it for long. So, if today your life is not where you want it to be, don't just ask, what do I need to do more of? Ask, who do I need to become? Because in the end, success rarely chases people who merely want it. It usually finds the people who quietly became worthy of it long ago. But in the end, everything always comes back to one very simple thing. What you do every day, not occasionally. Not when you feel motivated. Not when life is going well, but what you repeat during the most ordinary days. I think many people underestimate the power of small things because they do not create results immediately. Reading a few pages of a book does not change your life overnight. Waking up 30 minutes earlier does not instantly turn you into a successful person. Walking every day does not immediately transform your body in the first week. And because results come slowly, many people quit before life even has the chance to respond to their effort. That is the sad part. Because success is rarely built from big moments. It is built from small actions, repeated long enough. Like the way a tree grows. No one notices its change day by day. But if you come back a few years later, everything is completely different. People are the same way. A few small choices may not change your life today, but they are changing the person you will become. And in the end, destiny usually follows identity, not emotion. There are people who constantly ask, how can I become more motivated? But maybe the better question is, how can I stop depending on motivation? Because motivation is very unstable. Some days you feel like you can conquer the world, but there are also days when even getting out of bed feels difficult. If your life only moves forward when your emotions feel right, then you will live a very unstable life. The people who go far understand this early. They do not build their lives on mood. They build them on standards. Standards for how they live. That is the moment a person stops saying, do I feel like doing this today? And starts saying, this is the kind of person I want to become. That difference is enormous. One person acts based on emotion. The other acts based on identity. And over time, the second person almost always goes farther. Because standards help a person continue, even when emotion disappears. There are mornings when your body wants more rest, but your standards pull you out of bed. There are days when you want to procrastinate, but your standards remind you, this is no longer the kind of person I want to be. That is where real discipline is born. Not as a punishment, but as a form of self-respect, a way of telling yourself, my life is important enough to be treated seriously. I once realized that the people who move forward in life are usually not extraordinary in the big moments. They are extraordinary in the very small decisions no one sees. They continue when others stop. They keep small promises to themselves. They come back after terrible days instead of giving up completely. That is what creates the real gap, not temporary intensity, but consistency. Do you know what happens when a person consistently keeps their standards? They begin believing in themselves again. Real self-confidence does not come from repeating positive affirmations in front of a mirror. It comes from looking back and seeing that you are someone who follows through, someone who finishes what they start. When a person keeps doing that long enough, they begin changing the way they see themselves entirely. They no longer see themselves as someone trying to change. They begin seeing themselves as a disciplined person, a reliable person, a person capable of building something greater for their life. That is when identity changes. And when identity changes, actions begin feeling more natural. Like a farmer who no longer struggles every morning to take care of the field. He does it because that is who he is. The strongest discipline is always the discipline that no longer requires argument. It becomes part of your identity. And this is the final thing I want you to remember carefully. The future is rarely created on the day results appear. It is usually created long before that, during the days no one notices. The days you keep going even though nothing seems to change. The days you keep planting seeds, even though the field is still empty. The days you keep your standards, even though life has not rewarded you with anything yet. That is where destiny is truly written, quietly, slowly, but with incredible precision. And then one day, other people will look at your life and call it luck, while only you know everything was built from the small things you kept repeating for many years. But there is something not many people tell you about the journey of growth. That is, sometimes the road forward will feel very lonely. Not everyone around you will understand what you are trying to do. There are periods when you are the only person who can see the future you are trying to build, while everyone else only sees your current version, and that feels very frustrating. Especially when you are trying to change your life, but the results still have not appeared. No one applauds you for waking up earlier. No one notices that you are trying to become more disciplined. No one sees the small battles you fight every day inside your mind. They only look at your current results. And sometimes, that makes a person feel exhausted. I think some people quit too early, not because they lack ability, but because they feel like they have been walking alone for too long. Do you know what the most painful feeling during change is? It is when inside you are trying to grow, but the world around you still treats you like the old version of yourself. You begin thinking differently, prioritizing differently, dreaming differently, but your old environment still wants you to stay the same. There are people who will laugh when you begin taking your life more seriously, not because they are bad people, but because your change forces them to confront the part of themselves they are avoiding. A person who becomes more disciplined often unintentionally highlights another person's procrastination. A person who begins growing often makes people who stay stagnant uncomfortable. That is why you must be very careful about the environment you live in. There is a quote I once heard that feels very true. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And that is true in deeper ways than we realize. Because people absorb the energy of their environment very quickly. If you live around people who constantly complain, you will begin thinking negatively without realizing it. If you live around people with no goals, mediocrity will slowly begin feeling normal. But when you stay close to people with high standards, a part of you also begins wanting to become greater. That is why a good seed still struggles to grow when planted in bad soil. And many people do not fail because they lack potential. They simply stayed too long in environments that slowly killed their potential. I have seen very special people living around others who constantly pulled them back towards smaller versions of themselves. Every time they wanted to start something new, someone would say, "Be realistic." Every time they wanted to change, someone would laugh and say, "You'll end up the same as always." And if you hear those things long enough, you begin doubting yourself. That is why sometimes, to grow, you must learn how to walk part of the journey alone, not because you hate people, but because there are new versions of yourself that can never be born inside the old environment. An eagle does not learn how to fly among chickens that fear the sky. There are certain heights that only appear when you are brave enough to leave what is familiar. And I know that is frightening, because human beings always want to be accepted, want to be understood, want companionship. But growth sometimes means accepting that not everyone will understand your journey right now. Some seeds must remain underground for a very long time before anyone sees the first sign of life. And if that seed keeps digging itself up just to check whether it has grown yet, it will never grow at all. People are the same way. You cannot constantly doubt yourself and expect yourself to grow strong. There are periods when you simply need to keep going, quietly, patiently, without needing immediate recognition from anyone, because every real transformation needs time to take root. And this is what I want to say to anyone who feels lonely on their journey. If today you are trying to become a better version of yourself, but no one can see it yet, do not rush back to the old version of yourself just to fit in. Do not shrink your dreams just to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. Maybe right now, your life still has not completely changed, but if you keep learning, keep maintaining your standards, keep planting the right seeds, then eventually a season will come when everything begins to bloom. And at that moment, you will understand that your loneliest days were often the very days quietly building the strongest version of yourself inside. And eventually, you will realize that a person's life usually does not follow what they desire most. It follows what they accept repeating every day. That is why I believe what determines how far a person goes is not just ambition, but their standards. Standards are very quiet things. You cannot see them immediately when you meet someone. But if you observe long enough, you will see their entire life being built around what they accept and what they refuse to accept. A person with low standards for their time will easily waste entire days on things that lead nowhere. A person with low standards for their environment will stay surrounded by people who pull them down. A person with low standards for themselves will constantly allow themselves to procrastinate, quit, and live below their true potential. But the dangerous thing is, low standards rarely hurt you immediately. That is why so many people live with them for too long. Like water dripping onto stone. Nothing happens on the first day, but over time, the entire rock begins changing shape. Life is the same way. What you continuously allow will eventually become your life. If you constantly allow yourself to procrastinate, procrastination will become your identity. If you continuously allow mediocrity to exist in your days, your life will slowly begin reflecting it. I once realized something very real. There are people who do not truly lack the ability to succeed. They simply never set standards high enough for their lives. They want more, but accept too many things that drag them down. Accept meaningless late nights. Accept negative environments. Accept living without clear direction. Accept constantly breaking promises to themselves. And then they wonder why their lives never change. But life always responds honestly. It looks at your standards, not your words. You can say that you want a better life. But if your daily standards never change, then your future will be very difficult to change as well. That is why people who move forward usually make one very clear decision in their minds. They know they no longer want to live the old way, no longer want to work only when inspired, no longer want to procrastinate, no longer want to keep betraying themselves. That is the moment standards begin to form, not from motivation, but from becoming exhausted with the old version of yourself. There are people who change their lives, not because they suddenly become stronger than everyone else, but because one day they become too tired of continuing to live the same way. And then they begin saying, no more. Very simple, but very real. No more. No more living without discipline. No more wasting time. No more letting fear control their lives. That is when a person begins creating new boundaries for their life. Do you know what is special about standards? At first, they are very difficult to maintain because the old version of you is still there. Old habits still pull you backward. Comfort still calls your name. Procrastination still looks attractive. But every time you keep your standards, a new part of you begins becoming stronger. Like training a muscle. At first, it feels exhausting, very difficult, very easy to quit. But then over time, what once felt difficult begins feeling normal. And that is where life truly changes direction. Not when you have one perfect day, but when new standards begin becoming natural. When you no longer need to struggle to do the right thing, you simply live that way. You read books because that is who you are. You keep your promises because that is who you are. You stay disciplined with your time because that is who you are. That is when success no longer feels like something you must desperately chase. It begins being attracted to the person you are becoming. And the longer I live, the more I realize that is true. Because in the end, a person's life rarely rises above the standards they accept for themselves. If your standards are low, you will always return to your old life. But if your standards are high enough, then even if you move slowly, you are still moving toward a better life. And sometimes, that is the only thing you need to do. Keep going. Keep maintaining your standards. Keep becoming the person you once promised yourself you would become. And maybe, after everything we have talked about today, the most important thing is not how motivated you feel right now, but when this video ends, who you decide to become starting tomorrow. Because the truth is, no one can live your life for you. No one can stay disciplined for you. No one can take responsibility for you. No one can plant the seeds your life needs except you. And sometimes, what keeps a person stuck for years is not that they do not know what to do. It is that they are still waiting for some special feeling to appear before they begin. But life rarely changes that way. It changes when a person decides, no matter how I feel today, I will keep going. Maybe right now, you are not where you want to be yet. Maybe you are still tired, still moving slower than others, still trying to rebuild yourself from very small pieces. But do not underestimate that, because the strongest lives are usually not built under bright lights. They are built during very ordinary days, days no one sees, no one recognizes, no one applauds, just you and the decision to continue for one more day. I think that is the most beautiful thing about human beings. We have the ability to begin again. No matter how long we have procrastinated, no matter how many times we have broken promises to ourselves, no matter how long we have stood still, the moment a person truly decides to change, their life has already begun changing direction. Maybe the results do not come immediately, but the direction has changed. And direction will always matter more than speed in the end. A ship moving slowly, but in the right direction, will still arrive. While a ship moving very fast, but in the wrong direction, will only travel farther away from the life it wants. So, if today you feel like you are moving slowly, do not lose hope too soon. A seed that does not sprout on the first day does not mean it is dying. There are seasons in life when everything is happening beneath the ground, quietly, slowly, unseen by anyone. But the roots are growing, and once the roots become strong enough, the tree no longer needs to prove anything. It simply grows. People are the same way. When your standards become strong enough, when discipline begins becoming part of your identity, when you stop constantly abandoning yourself, then your life will begin changing in ways that are very difficult to reverse. Not immediately, but certainly, and then one day you will look back at the old version of yourself, the version that procrastinated, doubted itself, thought it could never change, and realize the greatest difference is not money, not status, not achievements, but finally you became someone who can trust themselves. If you are still here with me today, maybe a part of you still has not given up on the life you truly could have. And hold tightly onto that part, because there are many people out there who lost it a long time ago. If this video touched you, please like and subscribe so we can continue this journey together. And I want to ask you one thing before we finish. Out of everything we talked about today, what is the first thing you know you need to change? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, success is not something you chase. It is something you attract by the person you become.